Hello, Mr. Alquis. Thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you for having me. I agree with the recommendations made by Save the Bay, but one thing not brought up by Save the Bay or this committee has been the CRMC's woeful history of environmental racism. CRMC needs racial justice to be centered in its reorganization, and I have not heard, I've watched all the meetings, I have not heard it mentioned. Maybe I missed it, but I have not heard it mentioned once from this commission or anyone who's testified, and I haven't seen this as being centered. We know that the CRMC has acted in racist ways in the Port of Providence. There was terrible actions taken when they were approving the liquefaction facility for National Grid in the Port of Providence. Public hearings were well attended for that. Many people spoke. At one point, to shut a person up, the person who headed the council, Justine Cervenka, threatened to have a woman arrested because she mentioned that she felt she was being treated racistly. And it came to a halt. They cut her mic. It was awful. I bring this up not because I'm trying to rehash the past, because I know you don't want to do that, but you should also know that Grover Fugate and Cervenka withheld information the Attorney General determined was illegally withheld from the people in the Port of Providence that would have helped their case. It was communications between NOAA and CRMC about the extent of their ability to do things about the liquefaction facility in the port. This stuff was all covered. This stuff is all public knowledge. Because of the political nature of the board, people like Cervenka were put in to approve this facility, and it happened over the objections of the people who live in the port.
And so what are your recommendations, Mr. Alquis?
What's that?
Some of your recommendations. How do you think we should move forward?
Well, we need to make sure that somebody represents urban communities, port communities, stuff like that on the CRMC. Mm-hmm. We need to make sure that there's within the CRMC's reorganization, there is more than just lip service given to the idea of environmental racism, that people who live in these ports should have a say about, or near these ports should have a say about how things are built, what happens in there. We also need to think really seriously, not just about these important issues of aquaculture and pollution and everything else, but also about energy, right? Because we have a lot of energy services along the port, and we're going to be moving away from fossil fuels. It's not enough just to build windmill factories there. We should also be thinking about how do we limit and ultimately get rid of the fossil fuel industries that litter the coast in Rhode Island, right? So these things are all part of it, but environmental justice is part of that too. We know that when we have trucks going in and out of certain communities, the air gets bad. Asthma rates in the Port of Providence are the highest in all of New England, if not the country. And this is mostly a poor community. More languages are spoken in that port area than any other place in Rhode Island. This is a poor, mostly community of color. And I've been reporting on this for a long time. Mm-hmm. I don't know if anybody else will be bringing this up before this committee, but I think it's important that this committee take this seriously and think about this going forward.
Thank you. Yeah. I appreciate that. Environmental racism and environmental justice, two very good points. Any questions for Mr. Alquis from any members of the commission? Yep, Representative Carson.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Those are interesting remarks. Thank you very much, because so many times when we think about the CRMC, we think about South County, Newport, mm-hmm. And I think that we have to remember that the coast goes all the way around and does touch on a very wide variety of neighborhoods, poor neighborhoods, wealthy neighborhoods, old neighborhoods, mm-hmm. flooding neighborhoods, and that's important for us to think about as a commission. Thank you very much.
We should also note that poor communities don't have the money, the political connections, the power to do things like what happened in Block Island didn't happen in the Port of Providence because they don't have the ability to access the.
Well, as somebody mentioned earlier, somebody said, a person in Woonsocket has just as much right to access to the ocean as someone elsewhere. So thank you very much, Mr. Alquis, for the presentation and for bringing those very cogent points up.
Thank you.